Entering the 2024 season, the Memphis Tigers feel really good about the position they're in the AAC. Ryan Silverfield has done a great job of bringing Memphis to a certain level after there were concerns about his tenure early on. And now they're expected to win a conference that should be in their favor. You're looking at a team that has a lot of exciting things, and we'll dive into them here with this video. Before we do that, though, make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you like and share the video as well. It goes a long way in supporting the channel. We are well on our way to 5,000 subscribers, and it's not possible without you. So make sure you are supporting that channel and this deep dive series. And let's dive into the Memphis Tigers. Brian Silverfield, when he started with Memphis, it wasn't going to be easy right off the bat. Replacing Mike Norvell was going to be difficult for anybody that replaced him. And Silverfield had the fortunate or unfortunate, depending on who you're asking, opportunity to do exactly that. And it was not pretty early on. There were definitely a lot of bumps in the road, and this was a group that struggled a lot at times. And there were concerns about his future. And then things changed. The AAC switched things around, certain teams left, and Memphis found themselves as one of the favorites in this conference. And last year, we saw kind of a breakthrough with a 10-3 season, an offense that rediscovered its explosive touch, a defense that obviously needs to take steps forward and find ways to improve. But you're looking at a familiar formula when you look at what we saw in the Justin Fuente days, the Mike Norvell days. The offense should be exciting once again, and the defense has a lot of potential. The transfer portal helped this team quite a bit. You saw Silverfield and his staff take a lot of transfers, and you're going to see a lot of them contribute right off the bat. Mario Anderson was probably one of the bigger ones that we'll talk about today. We'll dive into him a little bit more in just a little bit. But you also saw them bring in players like Kedrell Lewis, who's looking to prove his worth coming from a Sun Belt team at UL Monroe. Devon Dennis and Elijah Herring. I think Herring was one of the bigger shockers in the transfer portal. I'm not sure how Memphis managed to pull that off, but he is someone who I'm really excited to see. But this is a team that lost quite a bit, though, so it's not a surprise to see them go so heavy in the transfer portal. Losing Davion Carter was probably one of the bigger losses. You also lost McKylan Pounders on the offensive line, so you needed to add certain players to step up and contribute right away. Kevin Carter, though he wasn't a starter, and we'll talk about why, I think that was a underrated loss. Someone who I think had a bright future with Memphis, but just wanted to get more playing time. Not a surprise to lose him there. The secondary loses a number of key pieces, but I still like what this team has returning on top of what they brought in the transfer portal. So this staff did a great job of bringing in talent to replace the guys that they lost. And they also have plenty of returning talent where you don't necessarily have to replace anybody. And the offense is probably a great example of that. You brought in some players to contribute, but everything starts with Seth Hennigan. And Seth Hennigan is still one of the more underrated quarterbacks in college football. Threw for over 3,800 yards and 32 touchdowns last year, just 9 interceptions. So that was really good. 274 yards and 5 touchdowns on the ground as well. Not going to be a runner first, but he is someone who is capable of running, and that's really exciting. This offense obviously runs through him. He's on his third number, though, in the last however many seasons, which is interesting. He went from 5 to 2, and now he's at number 9. And funny enough, the running backs next to him have his numbers, his previous numbers. Mario Anderson will wear number 2. Sutton Smith will wear number 5. And this rushing attack, while it wasn't the best last year, they finished 76th. I think that you're going to see a group that, oh, I won't say rivals because Daryl Henderson and Patrick Taylor were so good, but I think you might get glimpses of that era where you had explosive weapons, and we haven't seen that from Memphis in a couple years now. And that's probably been the biggest concern with this team is that this offense just didn't have the explosiveness that it used to. And we finally saw that again last year, and this year should be no different. Hennigan is a reliable quarterback that can make the right throws, which we saw with previous quarterbacks as well. We saw that with Brady White. We saw that with Riley Ferguson. We saw that with Paxton Lynch. I will say the one thing with Memphis that they've done well is they have recruited the quarterback position really well over the last 10 years. They have done an extremely good job of bringing in the right guys to run their system, and they have found the right talent to make plays. Hennigan is going to do that. And the running back position is deep. Mario Anderson was a huge addition, ran for 707 yards as the leading rusher for South Carolina last year, and Memphis found a way to snag him. Sutton Smith, I think this coaching staff and this program is really excited about what Sutton Smith could be for this team, and he is someone who's set to take huge strides in 2024. Brandon Thomas, a former freshman breakout player, is back once again. Only 172 yards, but had 9 touchdowns on the ground. So someone to keep an eye on there in terms of the third option, underrated player as well. Behind Seth Hennigan, if Hennigan goes down, that's probably where you have the biggest concern. You have options though. When you look at Arlington Maiden, Cade Cunningham, Harris Boyd, you have 3 options that are competing for that backup spot, and that will probably continue well into the season. Maiden's a freshman who have just turned 18, so he's young and has lots of potential. Cunningham came with former Marshall offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey, who was a big reason why this team had success last year. So he followed him here, and they have options. It's just that you don't really know who's the more proven option. So there's going to be competition. There will be competition well into the season, like I said, and they're just hoping that Anakin can stay healthy while those guys figure things out. The passing attack finished 9th last year, and Hennigan plays a huge role in that. He is a vital player to that attack, but also the wide receivers are stacked. This is a really good group, and if you are not paying attention to Memphis passing attack, then you need to expand your horizons. Rock Taylor is one of the best wide receivers in college football. Demir Blankumsey could be in that category as well. Taylor had over 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns last year. Blankumsey wasn't too far behind, 901 yards and 7 touchdowns. Toby Drake's a super underrated wide receiver as well. So that trio alone is what's going to make Memphis dangerous this year. And they're a big reason why they're set to take a shot at the AAC title in 2024. Behind them, you get an explosive weapon in Jair Shorter. The Auburn transfer just didn't see enough time on the field. Things just didn't work out in Auburn. When you look at what he's done in his career at North Texas before he went to Auburn, explosive is the best way to put it. He is someone who can stretch the field for you, and that's huge for a group that needs depth and needs those explosive players. Marcelo Brossi is someone who could be a contributor as well, but this staff is really excited about what Keondae Henry can bring to the table. Someone who is not fully integrated into the passing attack yet, but he is someone they expect to be a part of that passing attack during the season. The tight end position has always been an underrated position for Memphis. It's a group that doesn't get under the spotlight a ton, but they do a solid job. They're a part of the rushing attack, but they're also underrated contributors in the passing attack as well. Anthony Lanfear, 260 yards and 3 touchdowns isn't something that you're going to brag about, but he's a reliable player. He's a reliable pass catcher that can pick up yards when you need it, and you just need to find depth behind it. Brandon Doyle and Jamari Chisholm, you're looking at 2 guys that don't have a ton of experience, but are looking to add depth to that tight end position. Again, this passing attack will be fun to watch. I think that Cramsey did a great job of dialing up plays and getting guys open, and you're going to see that once again. And the talent level that they have returning makes it that this will still be a really exciting group in 2024. Now, we talked about how the offensive line lost a couple of big players, but you also add some big players as well. You get guys like Trent Holler to come in from Marshall. That was a huge addition, an experienced player who will be a steadying force for this offensive line. Kedrell Lewis, we talked about from ULM. He'll start at tackle, which allows Memphis to slide Xavier Hill to guard. If Hill can play tackle, great. And you can move Lewis to guard maybe, and you can keep Hill where he's at. But you have options. You have versatility with some of these players, and that's really exciting. Jalen Nichols is a former South Carolina transfer that could be really exciting to watch as well. And then Jonah Gamble will play center for Memphis. You have plenty of experience, and I think the center position is probably the one that you'll want to keep an eye on. Gamble will start there, but I think that Xavier Hill has the opportunity to play there as well. So you have, again, we talked about versatility. If you're able to move guys around and find depth by moving certain players to certain positions, that helps. You already saw that was Hill moving into guard. He can play tackle, he can play guard, and then you're trying him out at center. So you have options there. It's just a matter of finding where your team needs you the most. Depth behind this group is probably the biggest concern with this unit. Kendall McKenzie, Malachi Breland, Mitchell Gildenhouse, Jonathan Young, Calvin McMillan. You have players that are ready to take steps forward, but you have two JUCO transfers. Gildenhouse is probably the most experienced of that group, and you have young talent. It's just going to be coming down to who's able to step up and who can be be a reliable player because you have the starting five are set. You don't have really any concerns about that. It's just a matter of who plays where. After that is where you maybe have a little bit more concern. You have worries about who is your reliable backup, who can step up, and you can't put them anywhere. You have to see who is going to be the tackle, who's going to be the guard backup, and center feels like they have options. So you probably don't feel too concerned about that, but that also could be a strength because you have, again, depth in versatility. So I really like what this offensive line has. There's lots of potential there. You have some new faces that are new teammates, and you have to find ways to work together, communicate, that kind of stuff. The skill position talent doesn't have any concerns. So everyone's going to be keeping an eye on what this offensive line can do. The defensive line probably could be the same thing can be said about this group for the defense. That being said, the defensive line has lots of options from the transfer portal and from returning talent. Devontae Hamilton is the leader of that group in terms of returners. Didn't have maybe the best year, but he is someone who is capable of being disruptive. We talked about Elijah Herring. I'm still shocked that Memphis got him, and he is going to be an instant impact player that's going to be disruptive. When you look at what this defense did last year, it was not a good group. This was a group that struggled to slow teams down. And if you're going to put points on the board like Memphis will this year, you need a defense that's at least decent. You can't be bad at certain things. And that's why getting a guy like Herring is so huge because you're getting a guy who is a proven player at the SEC level, and now you're bringing him into the AAC. Teams are going to struggle to block him, and he's going to be a disruptive player that elevates this defense as a whole. On the interior, you're bringing Patrick Lucas Jr. from Indiana, so that was a solid addition for them. Good size at 6'2" to 320 pounds. Kevontae Spears is another guy to keep an eye on, a new player that is had a solid season for Memphis last year, looking to step into more a bigger role in 2024. The depth behind them is really exciting. Now, one thing with Memphis is that they've had depth before. They've had plenty of players. It's just that what does the ceiling look like? The question has always been the ceiling for this defense, and this year it feels like their ceiling can be raised. At the defensive end position, Reggie Grimeson comes in from Oklahoma in 2022 at 7.5 tackles for loss. Someone who can be explosive. He'll push Carmonte Hamilton for time at that position, be a solid rotational player. Devin Baldwin comes in from Jacksonville State, 6.5 tackles for loss for him. William Whitlow Jr., underrated player for Memphis, a guy who will definitely be a part of that rotation as well. So you have plenty of depth at the defensive end position. Defensive tackle is where things get a little bit less certain. Derek Hunter Jr. had a solid year for Memphis, looking for him to take a step forward. Javon Dennis comes in from Georgia State. And then you also have Joshua White, someone who is also looking to take that step forward. So you have options. You just maybe don't have as much proven depth at the tackle position as you do at the end position. But say one thing I'll say is that I expect this defensive line to be much better than it was in 2023 and probably in the couple of years before that as well, which also helps the linebacker position. That being said, Chandler Martin's a stud. If you don't know about him yet, definitely pay attention to what he can do. 95 tackles, 17 tackles for loss. Someone who's not getting the love he deserves on the national scale, someone who is capable of being a disruptive playmaker, and someone who is looking for other players to step up around him. You have two transfers coming in that will probably start. Javante Mackey comes in from Arkansas State. Matt Hudson is coming from Harvard. You have different levels of experience with the guys behind them, but Mackey and Hudson figured to be the guys that will step up around Martin. Martin is someone that everyone's going to know. They're going to have him circled, and that will make life a little bit more difficult for him. But also, you know what you're capable of doing. He is that good. And if this group and the defensive line can find a way to collectively take a step forward, this defense will do a lot of damage to NFC opponents. It's going to be tough with some of the teams they face, but it's going to help separate Memphis from some of these other teams. Behind them is where things are really interesting because, again, you probably don't have as much proven depth as you'd like, but you have some options. Dane Flager comes in from NCCU, 85 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, taking his game to a different level, coming from the FCS level. Bryce Edmondson is someone who could be a contributor, a decent season, 18 tackles, two forced fumbles last year. Donovan Mathina and Rodney Dansby are two other guys to keep an eye on at the linebacker position as well. So you have guys. It's just a matter of, are those guys reliable players? Are they able to contribute at a high level? And are you able to improve? I mean, this group, when you look statistically, there was not much that was good about this group outside of a handful of players. So that's going to be the one area you must improve on and must get better because the offense will do its part. It's going to come down to the defense. And the secondary is just as much to look at as any other group. And this is a group that was part of the 124th ranked pass defense last year. So there's definitely room for improvement, but it's also why this coaching staff went to the transfer portal and brought in some of the players that they did. Greg Rubin is back for another year. The former cornerback who had a huge freshman year has moved to safety. He will be a veteran in that group. And opposite of him is where things get really interesting. And I should say the safety position in general. You get Orland Marsh from Samford, who has been absolutely dominating in practice. He has really got the coach's attention so far. Someone who is definitely ready for this opportunity, but he has competition. Todd Rael comes in from Old Dominion. AJ Watts comes in from ULM. So those are two safeties that will push for playing time, even with Rubin and Marsh having those starting spots, not locked, but definitely the starters right now. You have good depth there. So that's really exciting for the future of this team and for this, I should say, this season. The cornerback position, Davian Ross and Tyron Taylor, two guys that are inheriting bigger roles than they did last year. You lost your two starting corners, and that means that new guys have to step up, and that's going to be a learning curve for both Ross and Taylor. The staff is confident in their abilities. They know that they're capable of competing at a high level. It's just a matter of being consistent with that. Andarius Coffey comes back at the nickel position. So you have guys that have experience, and it's going to be various levels of that. The one thing with Memphis is that you're going to face in practice a really good passing attack. It's just going to come down to you. Can you translate that and can you stack wins against that offense? Because if you can do that against that offense, you're going to be able to do that against a lot of offenses that you face. And the schedule we'll talk about in a little bit isn't going to do a lot of favors, but you'll also have opportunities to show that you can step up in a big way. Strengths and concerns should be pretty obvious for this team. The quarterback position to me is set with Seth Hennigan. Now, depth probably is concerned outside of him, but the quarterback position with Hennigan running it, since he's the only quarterback that will be on the field, feels good. Wide receiver is strength. That's not really debatable. To me, linebacker is a strength. Yeah, you bring in two new guys in Mackey and Hudson, but I really like what that group can be. I think that is a strength for sure. And you could add defensive line on this as well. I think that is a strength. Bringing Herring in was, I still can't get over that. That was such a huge addition by Silverfield and that staff to be able to do that. shows that you're serious about making a run, and also tells you that you have a staff that knows how to get certain level of players to come to your programs. Concerns: the secondary is going to be a concern. The cornerback position has two new starters. The safety position is a little bit more secure. You feel a little bit more confident in that group, but probably still a concern there. O-line depth is another concern as well. There's a lot more of those strengths though than concerns. The defense is going to be the X factor. That's not really a surprise. We've already pretty much gone in depth as to why that is the case. That shouldn't be a surprise for anybody that's paying attention to the Memphis program. The schedule is really interesting because it's a over under of 9 wins, and there's two games that you probably have. Uh, well, one for sure that we'll dive into that you're just not confident in for Memphis. The ceiling to me is 11-1. I think that the one game at Florida State is for sure a loss. Everything else is winnable. That is for sure a favorable schedule, but also it's going to be, I think, tougher than some people realize. 7-5 floor though is not bad. Again, that's if everything derails. I don't anticipate that happening. You should start 2-0. North Alabama and Troy. Troy is not the team that they are the last couple of years. John Summerall is headed to Tulane. I think that Troy takes a step back. At Florida State's going to be a loss. Yes, it's going to be fun to see Mike Norvell play his former team, but even with the losses that Florida State sustained in terms of their starting lineup, this is still a much better team than Memphis is. But who knows? Maybe Memphis has some tricks up their sleeves and Silverfield finds a way to stun his predecessor. Navy and Middle Tennessee should be wins, although Memphis has struggled with Navy in the past. So keep an eye on that. But I really like what that front group can do for Memphis against that triple option attack. At USF is a very tough game. I would almost put that game in with the Florida State game as a tough one to win. USF is going to be a very tough team. And if you haven't understood why, you can check out the deep dive I did about them earlier. So make sure you check out that video if you're looking to do some homework on USF. The Bulls will be very tough to beat this year. Their offense is very explosive. Could be a game that you see an absolute shootout. North Texas is underrated. That could be a sneaky tough game, especially coming off of the USF game. Charlotte should be better, though I still think they're towards the bottom of the conference. UTSA is going through some changes, though we're going to know exactly what this team looks like at the end of the season. Rice, UAB, I think will be okay. I think they'll be better, but again, Memphis is the better team there. That Tulane could be a little bit tricky. We'll see what John Summerall and that program look like towards the end of the year. They have some concerns of their own, but this is a favorable schedule for Memphis. This is a schedule where you could easily go 11-1, and I wouldn't be surprised by that. That being said, there are some tricky games. The Florida State game obviously feels like a loss to me. I think that I feel very confident about that being a loss. But outside of that, Memphis is capable of winning every other game. 11-1 feels realistic, and you're going to feel pretty good if you're finishing 11-1, 10-2. I would say that you do need to win the you have to win the AAC to get into the college football playoff. This is definitely a college football playoff team. They are in the hunt for that. You do have to finish 11-1 and win the conference championship, so you be 12-1. This is a team that's really going to be fun to watch. The offense, if you liked what Mike Norvell and Justin Fuente were capable of doing for this Memphis program, Ryan Silverfield essentially has this group back to what that looked like. You have an offense that can put up points, a defense that has potential. If they can find a ways to produce more turnovers and get the ball back to that explosive offense, then if you're a Memphis fan, you're going to be really excited about what this team can do in 2024.